In this demonstration, I want to show you how you can use Photoshop artboards to create sort of like a grid pattern that allows you to do easy masking and also photo corrections and things like that all in one swoop, as well as export the images out for use in another application later whenever you would have to lay your stuff up. But for right now, we're just going to talk about the Photoshop stuff because it makes it super simple. All right, so the first thing you want to do, and just so you have an understanding and a point of reference, what this is going to be for is for your first project, you have a photography phase where it's sort of, I think I coined it as learning how to see. And you're going to go out into the physical world and you're going to take photographs of design elements, things that you can kind of start to really look more closely at in terms of like how you would crop an image, how you can see something in a different perspective when you start to imagine borders around it, like with a frame, and how that, you know, adjusts the perceived scale of things and proximity of things, and how some things will become a whole as opposed to other things that will start to become single units. For instance, you know, like a flower has seeds in it. You know, maybe you don't normally see the seeds, but it's something that you would have to start looking for. If you're looking for examples of point, you maybe would start to see the points inside of a flower. And so you would get up close to take a photo. You can use your smartphone or any other kind of camera that you want. All right, so with that being kind of like the intro of what we're doing, let's look at what you need to do to set up your file system. First thing is that you want to create a folder that you're going to put your stuff in. You can call it whatever you want. Mine, you can see here, I called it Photoshop Artboards for cropping photos. Oh, except I misspelled photos. I think it says photots. Anyway, kind of like that. Anyway, so go ahead and make a folder, call it whatever you want, and inside that folder, what you want to do is create another folder that's called original images or something, right? So that you know that you've got, this is where your like original high resolution images are going to start. Okay, and the reason that this folder structure is really, really important is because what you do when you use Photoshop, you may or may not have already used Photoshop or taken classes, and you may not have. So the thing that's nice about Photoshop is that it allows you to link files so that you can maintain the original high resolution of the original file, but you know, as opposed to something like Microsoft Office, like Word, that'll embed something and it keeps it, you know, makes a copy of it and it embeds it in the application. This is different. It's just going to link to the file. So it's really important that you keep all your file structures intact. Otherwise, if you go from one computer to the next, you may end up with some broken files, some broken links, and your stuff won't show up. So anyway, make this folder. I'm calling mine original images. And inside of it, you can see that what I did is I opened it up and then I made some other folders, 5 other folders, and most of them are empty right now. But I called one of them type. You could call it letter form, whatever you want, but it's for typography, pictures of typography. So type, texture, point, line, and plane. And go ahead and make all of these because eventually you're going to do photography investigations for each of these things. But what we're going to do is we're going to start with point as the foundation of our demonstration. And what I did was I put some pictures inside of point that I wanted to use. Now you might have more than 9 pictures, but I have just 9 pictures. These are the pictures that I'm going to use inside of, that I want to use for my demonstration inside of my grid. But you might not know sometimes like exactly how a picture is going to really look once you start to move it around and try to crop it and change the scale and stuff. So you might want to start with more than that so that you have some options. Now let's take a look at these just really quickly. You can see that they're not squares. One of the things that we're going to do is we are going to end up making square images that are in a grid of 9. Okay, so none of these are starting off as squares. So you'll see that we're going to have to think about how to crop these for best effect. This one is an example of point. You can see with all of the literally the deterioration dings from the rust, and so that starts to create these discrete and separate individual points. You might also look at this and go, okay, well this sort of looks like lines too. Well, that has something to do with the arrangements of the points on the page because of their proximity to each other and so on. They sort of start to give you a sense of linear direction, right? But for this particular image, I picked this one out for point. Of course, this is pretty obvious. This is my mother holding a vase. I just thought it was just too cool, and I had to take a picture of her. Anyway, all right, here's another one, a picture of a mannequin, and I was looking at this specifically for the pupil. So like you might not normally look at a mannequin or something else and see point, you know, an example of point. But I looked at this and I sort of thought, well, maybe I could crop around the eye and focus on that. So zoom in and increase the scale of the eye. And then that would start to become something that would represent point. All right, it's a picture of a dog, right? And this I started to see because of the stark contrast of the brightness and darkness of the different sections. I definitely see points coming out of this. All right, this is pretty obvious. And the gears I thought really were interesting as a form of point reference. And again, this one is where you start to see like the inside of the flower. You might not normally think of that area, the sort of the seeding area, as something that's point, because you know the thing that you typically see in a flower right off the bat are its leaves and its petals. But if you look here, this is kind of what I'm going to focus on. Okay. So this is kind of how you can also start to think about taking your pictures. This is a typewriter, an old typewriter, so all the little circles sort of make sense. Okay, all right, so those are my examples. Now, what I'm going to do is I am going to create a new Photoshop file. Okay, and I already have this window open. What you'll do is you'll just either click on Create New, or you'll go up to File, and then you would choose to make a new file. And I'm going to show you the settings that I'm going to use, and I think that you probably also should. So you can approach this a couple of different ways, but the way I'm going to approach it is I'm going to make my squares about 2 inches by 2 inches, and that's because my squares on the page are not going to be any larger than that. If you wanted just to be safe, you could also make them 3 inches by 3 inches. That would be okay too. And I'm going to use a resolution of 300. Now, here's the trick about using a high resolution like that. Most people, when they take pictures with their digital cameras or phones, the resolution is actually 72, but the actual dimension of the file is gigantic, right? It has a lot of pixel depth. And so by me putting here that the resolution is 300, then if I drag a file into a Photoshop document whose resolution is 300, but the document I'm dragging is only 72, then what will happen is that the document it'll just natively scale down so that it matches the resolution. It'll take on the resolution of the parent document that you're putting it into. So because this is ultimately something that you would want to consider for print, like if we're making like a PDF book with some of this stuff in it, then you would want the resolution definitely to be higher, okay? So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and leave the settings just like this, and if you wanted to go ahead and give it a file name, you could do that. I'm probably going to save mine separately in a minute. Actually, let's go ahead and save it. So what I'm going to call mine is point photo. Yeah, oops, gotta spell photo. I can do photots. Photo investigation. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and click on create. And what it does, oh, the other thing too, actually, here, the other thing too I want to show you, I forgot to mention this, and it's really important. See right here where it says artboards, I just jumped back like I'm sort of acting like I'm going to create a new document. Where it says artboards, make sure that that's checked, okay? Otherwise, it's not going to natively choose to make an artboard for you. All right, so go ahead and click on artboards when you're making this. All right, I'm actually just going to close this. All right, so, and I already had that set that way. All right, you probably don't. I think the default might be that it's turned off. I'm not 100% sure. It was by default turned off on mine, but I don't remember if that is the new default. Okay, so make sure that you have artboard set up. Now, I'm going to leave this, I'm going to call it artboard 1. The first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to zoom out, and what I'm doing to zoom out, I'm on a laptop, so I'm using my fingers to pinch and zoom. All right, so, but if you aren't comfortable with that, you can also go down here and you can increase the scale. Like I could tell it I wanted it to be 30% and it would zoom out that much. You can also grab this magnifying glass and you can click to blow things up. And if you hold down Option on a Mac, Alt on Windows, you can zoom back out like that by clicking. Okay. Also, if you have a mouse and you hold down the Option key with a roller ball, you can also effectively zoom in and out and stuff. Okay, so what I want to do is, real quickly, I want to show you this on the left if you've never used Photoshop, because I understand that this is a foundation class, so there's a chance this is the first one of our classes you've taken. Maybe you haven't taken a Photoshop class. So if you look up here on the left, this whole thing is called the Toolbar, and it has a lot of really important tools that we would need to use. And right now I've got the Zoom tool selected, and I really can't stand that. Whenever I'm trying to click around, if I accidentally click, it's going to unexpectedly zoom me in. So I'm just going to choose this Move tool. Or you could also choose the Marquee tool because it's innocuous. If you accidentally select something, the Move tool is less innocuous if you accidentally move something. Anyway, this Marquee tool is literally just for selections. So what I need to do is I actually want to create a grid of 9. And it's going to be easier if I just do that now than if I do it later. So what I can do really simply, there's some different ways to duplicate your artboard. One of them is that I can just come over here and I can drag my artboard layer. Oh, and by the way, this is the layers panel. So if you don't see this set up in your system like this, one of the things that you can also do, if your environment looks different from mine, you can go up to Window, Workspace, and then go down to where it says Reset Essentials. So I'm going to reset it so that it goes back to the native way that Photoshop wants to show up by default. So this is how yours might be looking. I don't know. And so I'm going to just show you how to go ahead and jump up here to Window. Anytime you can't seem to find something really quickly, you can always go to Window and then you can locate it. If it has a check mark next to it, it means that it's already visible, and my layers is right here. But the thing is, sometimes there's so much stuff on the screen that even if it's technically in the foreground, sometimes you can't see it. And so sometimes what I'll do is I'll turn something off just so I can turn it back on again so it'll pop up and I can see where it is. Okay, so what I'm going to do is actually I'm going to move my layers panel out and I'm going to collapse this so that I have more real estate. Okay, and if I want to do this and you see something blue like that highlight, it means it's going to redock it. Okay, so if I did this and I dropped it, you see layers is now sort of set off separately from all that other stuff. And I might be okay with that. And then you can, like, see how I get a double-headed arrow? I can make something, you know, more open or less open, but I think that that's going to be okay. Okay, so the thing that I want to do, whoops, accident. The thing that I want to do here is, I actually do want to undock this, in fact. Okay, there. I want to show you the different ways you can duplicate artboards. One is that I can take this and I can drag it to this little, see that little page icon. If I drop it there, you see now I've got a second artboard in my layers, and on the screen I've got a second artboard. And so I can go over here in the layers, and where it says Artboard 1 copy, I can just call it Artboard 2, and it changes it on the screen. I could also have changed it here. Now the other thing too that you can do is I'm going to choose the Move tool. Oops, the Move tool now. Now I actually, and I'm going to undock this too. I actually do want to choose the Move tool, and if you're on a trackpad, you can kind of move your pasteboard around a little bit if you want. This thing on the outside of the artboards, it's called the pasteboard. Now, if I select this and if I select the actual artboard, there's not too much you can do with it other than like change the size of it. I'm going to undo that with Control or Command Z. Command is Mac, Windows is Control. So pretty much if you're a Windows user and I say Command something for a shortcut, then for you I mean Control something like Control C or Control V for paste or whatever. If I say Option, I'm on a Mac, then for Windows users I mean Alt. The Option key on a Mac is your Alt key on Windows. Okay, so what I need to do if I want to do duplication is I want to click up here where it actually says the artboard name. So I just clicked where it said Artboard 2, and you'll notice that my Move tool changed to an Artboard tool. In Photoshop, you see we have these little triangles in the bottom right corners. If you see a triangle like that, you can click and hold the tool, and it means that there are other tools that are hidden underneath. So the Move tool has a hidden tool underneath it called the Artboard tool, and whenever you effectively activate the Artboard tool, and I could have just chosen it. That's the other thing I could have done. But if you click here in the artboard name, it will activate the artboard tool. So now what I can do is I can actively choose like that to just click that plus button, and it made the third artboard. And what's nice is that because I didn't drag it into a new layer as an artboard set of layers, it didn't call it a copy of artboard 2. The time that it would be really nice to be able to drag something like Artboard 2 into the layer the new layer icon is that if you've got artwork that's actually in Artboard 2 that you want to duplicate into Artboard 3, so maybe you're just making different iterations of something, then it will allow you to do that, which is pretty nice. Now, I want to come back over here with my Artboard tool. I'm going to select this one, and I'm going to click on the name Artboard 1, and I'm going to click one down below, and down below that I'll click one, and then here I can choose Artboard 4, and then I can click here, here, and so on. Whoops, woo, sorry about that. And then, yeah. And then, but here's the problem, okay? See how I started haphazardly doing that? Look at how the artboard names are designated. You might not want to do what I just did, and I'll show you how to go back and undo it. See, now it goes 1, 2, 3, and then 4. Oh, but then I made this artboard next, and it goes to 5, and then 6 and 7. So it's kind of out of sequence. If I want them to go in like a linear natural progression that makes sense to me, then what I can do is, first of all, I can go to Window, and then I can find my history. And the reason I'm showing you this instead of just always jumping over here, like that's the history right there, this little icon, is that you're not going to be familiar with these icons just yet. So I want to just remind you how you can always get something you need. History panel allows you to, I'm going to drag that open, it allows you to go backwards a number of steps. So I'm going to go back to where it says New Artboard right here. And it looks like I've still got the good sequence. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. So if I click right here, it'll jump back in my history, so now I can sort of start fresh. All right, and if you click this little double-headed, or this little double arrow, it will collapse back into its icon in the panels on the side. Okay, so now I'm going to create these in a linear fashion. So I'll click on this plus symbol, and then here I'll click on it again, and now you can see that it's actually starting to create them in the order that I want. So if I click on Artboard 4 here in the title, and now I go down, you see that it made artboard number 7 come here. So it's kind of doing like a snake. Actually, not a snake. It's going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, and then that way we can actually keep our numbers straight, basically. Okay, and you might look at this and go, whoa, 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 there's something wrong. These are all out of order here. Don't worry about it. It doesn't matter. It's okay. As long as they're named appropriately, you'll be okay. If it really, really bothers you and you want them in an order like you want, that on top, you can click and drag it, and you can change it, and it won't change the order on the screen. Okay, so let's make Artboard 2 next, and see whenever I do that and I click on it, it selects the artboard. It makes it active, and then I'll take. Okay, and so you didn't have to watch me do all of those. I just went ahead and did them. Okay, now I'm going to get out of the Artboard tool because I don't want to accidentally make a new artboard. So now I've got my grid of 9, all right, which is pretty helpful. Now the next thing that I can do is I'm going to actually go and I'll select this artboard number 1, and I want to import something inside of that artboard. So when I import, it's actually in Photoshop, it's called placing a file. So if I go up to File and I say Place, oh, and actually, you know what? I don't think I've done yet. Let's do a save. Let's go ahead and save our file. And the reason I want to save it right now is because it's going to be more helpful to your application, to Photoshop, if it knows its current file path in order to make references to where those pictures exist in the file directories. So let's go ahead and we're going to call it point photo investigation. That's what we already decided to name it, and I'm going to save it. I'm not going to save it. Let's see. Let's go into, yeah, I don't want to save it inside of original images. I want to save it inside of my main directory up here, because it's not an original image. It's actually just a Photoshop document. So I'm going to save it up in my main folder that I first created when I started the demo. Let's hit save. All right. And now whenever I go up to File and I can choose Place Linked, not Embedded, Linked. What Embedded does, just so you know, is it'll actually embed the file in the document, so it'll make your Photoshop file gigantic if you've got all these really high-res files. Doing linked allows you to also do something else which is cool, and that is that it will, before I pick this, I'll finish my sentence. It will allow you to go and edit the originals, and it will automatically update it in the Photoshop document. Okay, so that's kind of nice. So anyway, right here is my current file that I'm working in, point photo investigation. I need to find the file I'm looking for inside of original images and then go down to where it says point and look inside of there. Okay, the first one I think I want to try putting in here is gears. So I'm going to say place. And then what it does, I'm going to sort of blow this up a little bit so you can see it better. What it does is it puts it in sort of like this X fashion, and it's immediately, the first thing it's going to do is try to make it fit in such a way that it's not exceeding the boundaries of the picture frame. But the whole part of this assignment is that you do need to exceed the boundaries of the picture frame. So one of the things that you can do, let's blow this up again, is that you can, in these corners, you see if I hover a corner, or even right here where it's got this point, you get these little double-headed arrows so that you can scale. And the trick about scaling, it's super important, is that if I click right here, I click and I'm holding, I need to hold down the shift key while I start dragging. Otherwise, if I let off that shift key, look what happens. It distorts the picture. You are not allowed to do that. So I'm going to hold down that shift key. Okay, now the other thing that I can do, you see how it's dragging it out in the sort of bottom right corner direction? Well, if I don't want that, I'm just going to hit undo. All right, if I don't want that, the other thing that I could do if I wanted to draw out from the center is I could also do click, I'm holding my mouse down, shift, and then also hold Option or Alt key, and it will scale out from the center point, which is really nice. And so you could decide like where you want to kind of have a focus, and then you can click here and just sort of move it around until you find the right place. And I think that I actually still want to make it bigger. Now here's the other problem, is that you might get yourself in a situation where you start to drag these out so far that you can't really see what you're doing anymore. And so I'm going to actually, I could keep dragging that out if I wanted. If that happens to you, you need to zoom out, and you can also do that with a magnifying glass to zoom out. But I'm going to zoom out, and then I'm going to click and shift Option to keep dragging, and you can see that it gets bigger and bigger, right? I actually don't want it that big though. I think I want mine somewhere maybe in this ballpark. I think that might be a nice composition, something like that. And then to commit to that change, I'm going to hit the return key. And the thing that's really nice about this, if I open up my Artboard 1, you can see that I've got my gears over here. Now, you see there's like a little chain link right here. That means it's a linked file. It's a smart object. If I hover it, it says smart object thumbnail. That means that I can't do any destructive changes to this file while I am inside Photoshop in this document. I would have to do any destructive changes to this file, like, and when I say destructive, what I mean is to actually make changes to the pixels themselves so that they can't be undone after you save and close the file. All right, I don't want to do destructive changes anyway. So what you can do, like let's say that you wanted to do a color cast or something, what you can do instead of actually modifying the original file is that inside of this artboard you could come down here, for instance, and you could add, see this little half circle? You could click on that and add an adjustment layer. And you could do something, for instance, there are lots of different options. You could adjust the vibrance. You could, let's actually see what happens if I adjust the vibrance. I can turn the vibrance up, and you can see it starts to get a lot oranger. I'm doing something that's like super, super exaggerated, and the saturation, like you can really, I don't want to do that, but I'm showing you like I'm really exaggerating. You can also turn the saturation down if you wanted something more muted. So you can really start to adjust these things. And if you don't like what you've done, see how it created an overlay? If I turn the virtual overlay off, not virtual, but the eyeball visibility, that's what I'm trying to say. Turn the visibility of that overlay off, then you can see that I still have my original file. And then if I don't like it, I can always take that and put it in this little trash can. And it's not affected. And what's also nice is it's only going to affect whatever's inside of that artboard, which is kind of cool. So what you could also do is, for instance, if I wanted to add something called HueSaturation. If I click on colorize, it will literally turn something into a monotone image that adds one color plus lightness and darkness, or black and white values. All right, and so you could, make it sort of like a sepia print or something like that. I'm going to suggest that you don't do that. I don't really want you to do that for this particular assignment. So if I turn off colorize, what you can also see that happens is you can actually start to change the base value. And what it's doing is it's not actually turning it into something that's monotone. It's just changing the primary value, or primary hue that it's based off. It was sort of a very orange image. Now it's, you're making these adjustments and it's changing. You can also, I'm going to undo that. You can take the saturation down a little bit here if you think it's overly saturated. You can also adjust the brightness if you want to, do that, but I would try to avoid changing the brightness or the lightness here. Anyway, actually, I had already optimized this picture, so I don't think it needs any help. What is going to be very important to you, though, for the most part, is, especially if you're taking pictures with a flash or something like that, is that you need to, correct the actual levels, right? And so that you've got a full tonal range in your image. And the way that you can do that without destructively modifying the image is you can come down here to make a new adjustment layer, and what you want to find here is where it says levels. You can also do curves too. So I'm going to show you both. I'm going to show you first levels, and what you're going to see here is you've got this picture where you've got really, really bright highlights, and it's kind of hard to see. Actually, you know what? I'm going to get rid of this real quick. You can do that in levels, but because it's sort of small on the screen, I'm going to show you this other way that you can look at it. But just know that you don't want to make the changes this way because it is destructive to the image and it won't let you. So if I go to image, I can go to adjustments, and then I can go to levels. This gives you a better, bigger vision of what I'm looking at. And off to the left, you can see that's the output for black. Off to the right, that's the output for the brightest of white. And then in between are the middle tones, or the gray gammas. They're referred to as midtones, grays, or gamma tones. Okay, that's all the same thing. And you can adjust this, to kind of like start to wash out some of it, so that you've got less contrast, or you can make more contrast by moving in the other direction. I'm going to undo what I just did. Now, if you have something that doesn't have pure white, then what you can do is you can start to drag this in, like so that you can get some of the brighter colors to pop out. And essentially, whenever you start to drag this slider in and drag that slider in, you get a much, much greater contrast, because what you're doing is you're reallocating more pixels towards darker or lighter stuff, okay? But this is what you always want to see, is you want to see at least a little bit of pure black and a little bit of pure white. And we actually have that, all right? You can see the spike over here, and you can see the spike up here. All right, so I'm going to hit cancel. And I'm also going to show you down here, it's probably the same thing with the adjustment layer, the thing that's called curves. Let me see what that looks like. Yeah, and see, it's kind of still hard to see the histogram. That's what it's referred to as a histogram. So let me I think just for the sake of the video, it'll be hard for you to see it in the video. So I'm going to again go up here to image, and I'm going to go to adjustments, and I'm going to go to curves. Again, this is the destructive view. And you can actually see a combination of things here. You can see right here where I showed you levels before. See this like allocation of pixels? And what this is that on this vertical axis, it's the number of pixels, and on this horizontal axis, it's how many pixels are in the dark range versus the lighter range. And so, and you see up here it's showing red, green, and blue, and then RGB is the composite of all of them. All right, and so if you wanted to see how many red channel pixels there were versus green channel and so on, you could actually isolate them like that if you wanted. But I'm going to look at the composite. But my point is that in curves, it actually shows you this histogram too. So if I were to like want to make it brighter, I could literally grab this point and just drag it this way, and it effectively is like dragging that slider that I showed you before. See how it's a slider here? It's the same as that slider in levels. But what's kind of cool with the curves element is that you can actually sort of do a little bit of a boost by kind of grabbing this line just a little bit and dragging it up, and then grabbing this line just a little bit and dragging it down. And you can see that it like actually increases the contrast, but not in some really weird way. And then you can kind of adjust it and play with it and stuff to see if you need that. And a lot of times, like I said, this image is already fine. I've already optimized it. But a lot of times your images need a little bit of a boost, right, of contrast or something. And so this is one of the ways that you can do it. All right, those are some really basic color correction things, but they're also really important color correction things. So at this point, I'm going to show you one more thing where I'm going to add something into the second artboard. I'm going to collapse artboard 1. I'm going to select artboard 2, and you see that it selected it here. And again, I'm going to go up here to File, and I'm going to go to Place Linked. And this time, I think I'm going to choose maybe the grass one. I think that might be a nice contrast, having the green next to this sort of oranger picture, the green and blue. So I'm going to choose that one, and I'm going to place it here. It's like really nice and graphic. I'm going to move that out of the way a little bit, and I'm going to expand this. Again, I'm holding down Option or Alt and the Shift key to expand from the center. And you can make a decision like how much you want to expand it. Now, the first thing I would say is that if you expand it too much, you're going to lose the whole concept of the point, right? Suddenly it becomes more about the lines. And this is one of the goals of this assignment, is to help you start to see how scale and framing and cropping really make a huge difference in your perception of what something is made up of, like how it's comprised. All right, and so if I sort of do it like that, then that might be fine for me. And the other thing is, if I want the maximum, kind of the maximum number of points in here, I might just sort of make it so that it fits like that, okay? And then I'll commit to it. And I think I'm okay with that. And so what you would want to do is just continue doing that for the rest of these. I'm not going to show you in all of these. I showed you the first two, and you can see in the second artboard I've got that, and the first one I've got that. You can see the other ones don't have anything in them yet. And you can just keep going like that, and then you can add adjustment layers down here to fix the levels or the curves or the saturation or the whatever, right? And what you're going to be doing when you start to add these is to try to arrange them in a compositional array in such a way that they work really well with each other in this grid format, so that you can kind of see how they'll interact with each other. Sometimes like one picture might imply direction based on the way that something is in the picture, and then maybe another one will imply direction. Well, you can also do something, just so you know, like if you wanted to click up here in gears, right, I can click this, and now if I want to do a free transformation to rotate this picture, I can do Command or Control T, and you see I get my smart object again. And notice if I come down here, see how my double-headed arrow turns into a curved one? Well, that's going to allow me to rotate it. If I click and hold Shift, if I hold Shift, it will constrain it to an axis, right? But if I don't hold Shift, it'll allow me to sort of gradually do it, and I could move it around. And maybe I would want to explore a little bit more with putting more points on the page, so, and you got to make sure that if you do that, like up here it's kind of coming off of the page. So in that case, I might want to move it up there, and I might need to scale it just a little bit. So let's scale it from here. I'm going to hold down the Shift key. Oh, and look what it did. I need to hold down Shift and Option in that case. So let me undo that last thing, okay? Let's not grab it from there, actually. Let's hold down Shift again, and there, they all fit. And so that might be something like where it starts to imply, like, see how this on the other picture is sort of like the beginning of a hole, right? It's the beginning of an opening, and then this gear starts to kind of complete that a little bit. That could actually be pretty interesting. I could even have it sort of coming off the edge a little bit so that it actually starts to look like that these things are completing each other, right? So you can start to think about stuff like that, right? And I could commit to that. And as you're arranging these things so that they start to feel like a whole unit, okay? All right, I'm going to end this demonstration here. You need to fill out all of these for each time you do your photo investigation, but then in the next demo, I'm going to show you how you can export these images out discretely and separately.